All right, UFC 227 full card breakdown happening now. What's going on, everybody? On this channel, we talk about things that are happening in the world of MMA and combat sports. My name's Drew, and today I want to talk about one of the best events that's going to happen all summer. It's UFC 227, and it's headlined by the rematch between Cody Garbrandt and TJ Dillashaw. Their first fight was amazing. I think it was one of the best fights of 2017, and I'm super pumped for the rematch. But before we talk about what I think is going to happen in those fights, I'm going to break down this card like I've done in other videos. If you watched them before, you know I start at the bottom of the card and I work my way back up to the top in the main event. This hopefully will be a fairly quick video because looking at my camera over there, I see that the battery is going to die, so I better get going. One of the things that I noticed about this card is in my mind, as I was kind of mentally preparing to make this video, I was like, man, this card is absolutely stacked. I thought it was as big as 226. I thought it was one of the biggest events all year, and it is. It is a really good card, but in particular, it's actually the main card that is really good. The undercard is actually kind of okay. It's not amazing, to be honest with you, and it could still have some good fights on it because you never know. Like, an MMA fight can always be good. It doesn't need the name value or the recognizable star to be good. But as it stands right now, there's not a lot of people on there that I'm super familiar with, which brings me to my next point. Sure, in all of the other videos that I've done that are full card breakdowns, what happens is at the beginning of the breakdown video and the beginning of the card, there's inevitably some fighters on there, and I don't know who they are. And I said this in my Cody Garbrandt versus TJ video. It was on one of these videos. I said, look, there's always some guy that comes onto the video in the comment section and goes, bro, you didn't even know who this person was. Why are you even making videos? Look, there's always going to be some fighter that is 1-0 in the UFC or 0-1 in the UFC, and they fought on the prelim undercard of some fight night in some town in the middle of nowhere. And yeah, there's a good chance that they didn't stand out in my mind, or potentially on those undercard fights on those random fight nights, there's a chance I didn't watch it. There are fights every weekend. There's Bellator, there's UFC, there's PFL. I mean, there's Fight Pass with an endless library. I mean, you can constantly be watching fights, and I do, but unless they've done something spectacular, it's pretty hard for them to stand out in my mind if they've only been fighting on the prelim of an undercard. And so I said in that other video, look, if that bothers you, you can probably stop the video now. There's fighters on this undercard that I'm not super familiar with who they are, and by saying not super familiar, it's that I have no idea who they are. And so deal with it. You know, everybody leaves their comments saying, how did he not know who this guy was? I wanted to point out in that other video that Chael Sonnen actually, in the lead up to the International Fight Week card where Israel Adesanya was fighting Brad Tavares, he didn't even know who Israel Adesanya was. And that's Chael Sonnen. He works for ESPN. He makes a living analyzing fights. And so if he can not know who Israel Adesanya was and he was main eventing a fight, I think it's okay if I don't know who friggin' Weili is, but I did actually look her up. But you get what I'm trying to say. Anyway, I'm belaboring the point. I already said my piece in another video, but I felt like I needed to say it again. If that's gonna bother you, this channel's probably not for you. But for the rest of you that stick around and like this content, thank you. And I'll stop blabbering on, and we'll just get right to the fights here. So, in a flyweight fight, there is Jose Torres versus Alex Perez. I'm taking Jose in that fight. Then in a featherweight fight between Matt Sayles and Shaman Moraes, I'm taking Shaman. In a women's strawweight fight between, okay, this is the one I was just talking about. In a women's strawweight fight between Danielle Taylor, who has a couple fights in the UFC, versus, and I can't pronounce her name, Zhang Weili. Now, here's the interesting thing about that. This is, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing her name right, Zhang. I'm not sure. This is Zhang's first fight in the UFC, which is one of the reasons why I don't know who she was. Now, she's also a beast. She's undefeated, and if you look at her record, she has a lot of impressive. She's an impressive record in a promotion, I'm guessing, in some part of Asia, and so I'm picking her in this fight. She's undefeated. Danielle Taylor, man, I don't know why I can't say her last name today. You know, has had some good fights, but I think that this is a fight that's intended to spotlight Zhang. And hopefully I'll learn how to pronounce her name properly later. Then we have Weili Buren versus Bharat Konder. And both these fighters have fought once in the UFC. And they both lost in their opening fight in the UFC. So again, don't stand out in my mind. I'll take Weili Buren. Then you have Ricardo Ramos versus Kang. I'll take Ricardo. In a women's strawweight fight, you have Viana versus JJ Aldrich. It's an interesting fight as well. I'll take Viana. In a bantamweight fight, you have Benito Lopez. He was off the Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series, and he's coming off a loss though. He's had 2 fights in the UFC so far. He's fighting Ricky Simon, and I'll take Benito in that fight. Then you have Pedro Munhoz. I'm not pronouncing that right. Pedro Munhoz versus Brett Johns. I'll take Pedro in that fight. And then on to the main card. This is why I like to make these videos, because again, I'm not sure who some of those undercard fighters are, but in the main card, you have Correia versus Irene Aldana. And for all intents and purposes, I think that this is a bit of a tune-up fight for Betch. You know, she's coming off that Holly Holm loss. It was a pretty boring fight. And a pretty embarrassing loss for Betch. You know, she was sort of mocking Holly and saying, come on, do something. And in the middle of that, gets head kicked and then forever became on highlight reel for YouTube internet montages of cocky fighters getting justice. And Betch was on the bad receiving end of a Holly Holm head kick. And, you know, she's not the first one, let's just say. So I'm taking Betch in this fight, and I think a lot of people assume that she's just absolutely terrible, and I think that would be a mistake. Yeah, you know, Betch didn't have a good performance against Ronda. She had an even worse performance against, maybe not even worse, but had a really bad performance against Holly Holm. She had a no contest in there in the middle against, I can't remember who. But, you know, she is still a veteran and the more experienced fighter in the octagon. And she has more experience on high-profile fights. And I think that you can't underestimate how much that main card experience or that spotlight experience, just doing even media pressure and the fight week grind and all the things that you got to do, the open workouts, all that stuff. I mean, all those things, if you're not used to it, then it can really wear on you and affect your performance. And I think that Betch has been there before, and that stuff won't take a toll on her, certainly not as much as it might against Irene. Now, Irene's fought in the UFC, but, you know, I don't think that she has what it takes to beat Betch. That being said, this is a really a do-or-die fight for Betch, because if she doesn't win this fight, then it's off to the undercards for her. And the one thing that actually kind of is really unfortunate for women fighters is that, like, if she was a male fighter and she lost this fight, she would probably get cut by the UFC and then go over to PFL or go over to Bellator. But for female fighters, yes, those promotions do have a female division, but they're not really high profile enough to make a real career out of. And I don't think that that's really a viable option for somebody like Betch. So it's kind of a do or die fight for her. I hope that it works out for her. I guess, I don't know. I'm not really a fan. I mean, if it does, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I'm picking her to win. So for that reason, I hope it works out for her. Then you have Cub Swanson versus Renato Moicano. The interesting thing about this is that Renato is the betting. Sorry, I don't know what that. My dog's making some noise upstairs and it's really distracting me. I don't know what she's doing up there. I'm home alone and I'm worried that she's getting into something she shouldn't be. Anyway, Cub is the betting underdog in this fight. And that's got to be the first time in a little while. Well, no, that's not true. I guess he would have been the betting underdog against Frankie Edgar. And Cub hasn't had the easiest string of fighters to go against recently. Like, he's against Brian Ortega, who's #1 contender, fighting for a belt. Then he is against Frankie Edgar. Poor Cub. Like, those are two of the worst possible fights. And so now he's against Renato Moicano, and he's the underdog in the fight. I still think he has what it takes. I think people are underestimating Cub. I mean, Cub is high level. And Cub, you know, yes, he got in a slugfest against Duho Choi. And yes, he knows how to brawl, but he's also extremely technical, extremely crafty. He's absolutely a veteran. And when I say that somebody is a UFC veteran, like you'll hear me say that a lot in the videos, it's not that it in and of itself means anything. But again, coming back to that octagon experience, you heard Georges St. Pierre after he had been away. He had been away for a year and a half or something because he had tore his ACL back before the Jake Shields fight. I'm pretty sure is when it was. And he had been away for a little while. And then that fight went for 5 rounds. And people asked George, like, what did you think about the fight? How do you feel about having gone 5 rounds? He said, for me, it was really good. I needed to spend that time in the octagon again. I needed to be under the lights. I needed to remember how the canvas felt. I needed to... It's that whole ring rust concept. Well, on the flip side of that, being a veteran like Cub Swanson in the sport, it means that all those things, again, media day, the feel of the lights, hearing Bruce Buffer, I mean, that's not going to spike your adrenaline as much. It still will, but spike your adrenaline as much as another fighter. Renato isn't some new fighter to the UFC, but Cub's been there before. You know what I mean? You ever hear the expression just like act like you've been there before? Cub doesn't need to act like he's been there before. Cub actually has been there before. He's been in absolute wars, maybe the best fight I've ever seen. I saw it live with my own eyes. And I think that he has what it takes to pull this off. And I think he's being grossly underestimated in this fight, at least by the odds makers, although I know that doesn't necessarily represent the skill. Renato has a really impressive record. He only has 1 loss, but he is on a 3-fight win streak. So this is a tough fight for Cub. But Cub's coming off 2 losses. Again, has something to prove, wants to stake a claim that he belongs in the UFC. He belongs on the main card. And I think that Cub has what it takes to win this fight. So for me, I'm picking Cub Swanson in this fight by decision. I don't think he'll stop him. I don't think he'll submit him. I think this is a fairly exciting fight. I mean, Cub Swanson fights are they're always great. And I think it goes to decision, and I think Cub ekes it out by unanimous decision. Then, in a great fight, I filmed this video. I might not have put it up on YouTube, but I've done a breakdown video on Alexander Gustafsson versus Volkan Ozdemir. Great fight. Such a good fight for a lot of reasons. The only challenge is we haven't seen enough information from Volkan Ozdemir to know what kind of fighter he's going to be in the 2nd round, the 3rd round. What's he going to be like when he has faced some adversity? What's it going to be like when he faces pressure? What's it going to be like when he gets punched in the face and gets dazed a little bit? The only time we've ever seen that with him is when he fought Daniel Cormier, and it wasn't great, to be honest, although Daniel's maybe the best of all time. But we don't have enough information on Volkan to really know, like, what is this fight going to be like? So all you can really go off of is either Alexander Gustafsson is going to win by decision or win by a late round stoppage, or he's going to, dominate the fight. Or the flip side of that is Volkan stops him in 30 seconds, because that's the only way that we've seen him win fights, really. So you can check out my full breakdown video on that. For all the videos that I've made individual breakdown videos, all the fights that I've made individual breakdown videos on, the link will be in the description to that full-length video, full-length analysis or breakdown, whatever you want to call it. And I'll also link up here, like a little card pop up that will allow you to click on that video. So I did one of those for Alexander Gustafsson versus Volkan, and that's basically what I said, is that I think that Alexander Gustafsson wins this fight. I think he looked phenomenal against I've forgotten his name. That happens to me a lot when I'm on camera for whatever reason. Glover Teixeira. Gosh, that took way too long to think about. My goodness, I'm gonna have to cut the video because I was thinking about that one and humming and hawing about it. He looked great against Glover. That was a great standout performance from him, especially after he thought that he was talking about retirement. He looked phenomenal. He looked like a world champion against Glover. So if we see that Alexander in the octagon, I think he just dominates Volkan. But at the same time, Volkan Ozdemir is this X factor that he could just stop the fight any second. So who knows? But you can check out my full breakdown video on that, where I explain those things in a little bit more detail. But to make a long story short, I'm picking Alexander Gustafsson in that fight. Then in the co-main event, you have D.Johnson versus Henry Cejudo. It's got to be DJ. You got to pick DJ. I mean, Henry did look better in his last fight. Absolutely. Henry has shown improvements since the last time that he fought D.Johnson, but it's still not enough, and definitely not enough considering how poorly that first fight went for Henry. I just don't think that there's anybody at 125 pounds that can beat Demetrius Johnson. So I filmed a full breakdown video on that where I unpack some of those things in more detail. You can check that in the description below, the link for that. But ultimately, I just don't think anybody can beat DJ at 135 pounds, 25 pounds. The fight for DJ is 135 pounds against TJ Dillashaw or the winner of the main event, because DJ's he's cleared out the division. And I respect that he wants to go out there and set the record for championship wins, but it's just time. It's just time. I don't want to see him beat people at 125 anymore. And I just don't personally think that that division is deep enough to consider his accomplishments there making him the greatest of all time. And I talk about that a lot in the full breakdown video. I don't think that you can consider Demetrius Johnson the greatest of all time, even though he has the most championship defenses, because I just think the division of 125 is just simply too weak. And it's not that it looks weak because DJ is that much better. I just think that the level of competition there is just not as strong. So let me know what you think in the comment sections below. I'm sure there'll be many of you that are not kind, but yeah, DJ he's not the greatest of all time for me, because not because he hasn't moved up to 135, but because I haven't seen him take the risks per se to make me think that he can be considered pound for pound the best. I hope that makes sense. Check out that full video if you want to hear me explain it in more detail. And then lastly, TJ Dillashaw versus Cody Garbrandt. One of the best fights all year. Maybe the best fight that we're going to have all year. And I loved their first fight. It's one of my favorites. I rewatched it recently. I actually rewatched it on camera, so you can check out that video where I wanted to be informed about my opinion before making this video and making my full breakdown video. So I rewatched their first match again for I've watched it maybe 5 times, but I watched it again and turned on the camera so you can hear my thought process as I was watching the fight. But listen, here's what I have to say about this one. If these guys were to fight 10 times, and maybe they will, if they were to fight 10 times, I think that it's like each win 5 times, or TJ wins 6 times and Cody wins 4 times. Like, these guys are so closely matched. TJ got dropped at the end of the first round. Cody was looking good, looking loose on his feet before then. But ultimately, TJ did what he needed to do in the second round. If you watch my video where I'm rewatching the fight, you know I'm saying I'm really concerned about TJ standing in the pocket and trading with Cody. That last exchange that happened between Cody and TJ is them really both planting their feet, standing their ground, and throwing hooks until somebody lands. And somebody was going to get dropped and have the fight ended in that moment. I'm absolutely certain that in that moment when the two of them decided to start trading like that, one of them was going down. And in this last fight, it was Cody Garbrandt. But there's no guarantees that in the second fight it's going to be Cody again. I could easily see TJ getting dropped and TKO'd in that one. You know, he's been TKO'd before by John Dodson. He's looked really good since then. But that exchange where they were doing that reminded me of Carlos Condit versus Dan Hardy, where they're both just throwing a hook and somebody's going to land. That was a dangerous move, and I believe that if TJ Dillashaw wants to win this fight, he needs to stay more on the outside, set up those kicks. You saw him land a head kick in the first fight. He needs to do that kind of thing again. He's got to keep his distance, use his kicks, use low kicks to set up and fake a later high kick, fake takedowns to set up a kick, do something like that. But standing there with Cody, who I think is the better boxer, is not a good idea. For TJ Dillashaw, he needs to use his Muay Thai kickboxing to maintain a good distance and put damage on Cody there and either win by decision or do enough damage and then drop him later in the fight. That's the way to go. I don't think TJ can take him down. I don't think that Cody's necessarily the better wrestler, but his wrestling is good enough that I don't think TJ can take him down. So in this fight, I will pick TJ to win. I do think it'll be by decision. I think this will be a war. I think it'll be 5-round war. I think it will not only be a 5-round war, but 3 rounds for one fighter, 3 rounds for TJ, 2 rounds for Cody. I think this is going to be a really close fight. These guys know each other. They've trained together. They fought against each other. I'm super excited. This one for me, this fight alone makes this whole card. I love it. I can't wait to watch this fight. I'm going to watch it again and again. I think these guys fight a 3rd time. Even if TJ Dillashaw wins, I think they end up fighting a 3rd time, because this is going to be one of the greatest rivalries we've ever seen in MMA. Right up there with Tito Chuck, right up there with John Jones Cormier. This TJ Dillashaw versus Cody Garbrandt rivalry is going to be one for the ages, because they're both young fighters. They can't stand each other, and they're so closely matched in skill. there's a good chance that Cody Garbrandt wins this fight. Now, that being said, you can check online. I'm not going to quote this statistic because I don't know what it is, but there's a stat out there that says when a champion loses the belt, it's extremely rare for them to win the rubber match. When they get the rematch, it's very rare for them to win. Look at Joanna and Jacek. Look at I don't know. There's other fighters out there. Anderson Silva never got the rematch. Yeah, Anderson Silva. Yeah, it's very, very rare for a champion that lost their belt to come back immediately and win it back. So keep that in mind. It is what it is. And those are my picks for the fight. Let me know what you think. I know that there's probably some that you disagree with, and there's probably some that you want to be like, how do you not know who this person was? So you can say what you need to say. But that's my prediction on UFC 227, and you can check out my individual breakdown videos in the YouTube description. And thank you so much for watching. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Check out those videos, and we'll see you after the event is over. Some big announcements happening for September, potentially Amanda Nunes versus Cyborg. You got Valentina Shevchenko versus whoever the 125-pound champion is. I can't remember her name at the moment. Nico Montana. Yeah, anyway. I'm excited. I mean, I'll save you the breakdown video. Valentina wins that fight. Anyway, that's not what this one's for. Thank you so much. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Fight the good fight, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey, thank you so much for making it to the end of this video and listening to me ramble about MMA. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you watching and taking time out of your day to view this content. If you want to see some more videos from me, you can look over here on the right and click on those. Also, if you want to know when I upload new videos, you can subscribe to this channel, or better yet, click the notification bell. And you can also check out my Patreon account. Nah, I'm just messing with you. For real though, give me money.